Hey, good morning. It's Saturday morning, March 16th. Obviously, you can tell by our intro, it's the day before St. Patrick's Day, and I'm sitting here with my colleague, Tony Olocasio. Jim O'Donnell, you'll see, is not here. He is not late. I just want to specify that right at the beginning. He's not late. He was called away to help with a financial emergency in our sister state of Connecticut, and they asked him to go to Mohegan Sun for the day so they could...
I think he's negotiating a new treaty.
With the Hackaways. So Tony and I are here, and we are honored to have Town Manager John Curran, who took time off from his Saturday to come visit with us. Kind of like a pre-town meeting conference we're going to have with them. Tony, there's me and of course my colleague, right wing Tony Olocasio. So we're going to start off tonight with this morning with Tony. Tony, why don't you start it off?
Sure, John. Thanks for coming, taking time out of Saturday. It's been almost a year since you were here last time. We're pretty close to it seems. So, in the past year, why don't you give us a quick state of the town, I guess, for lack of a better word. Where the town stands right now, things, maybe some initial projects, you don't have to get too deep in them, but things that the normal Joe may not know is happening.
Yeah, okay. Well, the town is in very good financial shape. Over the last couple of years, we've worked to set up a debt stabilization fund, and we have a good surplus in our other reserves, and we have a good bond rating, and our budgets have come in very conservatively, so we've worked hard at that, and the town should be proud of that and confident in the way that it's managed financially. The budget in the town this year is going to be about $133 million. It's going up 1.59%. We are actually putting on a few public safety officers. We're putting back on 2 firefighters and 2 police that were cut in previous years. Sure. So we've been able to save some money in different areas, and that's helped us to reestablish the level of service that is appropriate for the town. So that's the good thing in terms of, Billerica has a lot of opportunity for financial leverage in terms of we have a good commercial base that could be better. And that's what I spend most of my time on. Because ultimately, if you have a strong commercial base, you'll have a low tax rate and keeps Billerica affordable, allows us to provide the level of service that people are akin to. And so that's kind of the balance that we strike. This year, as we go through all the different things, one of the big things is sewer. We've reactivated the sewer program at a very high level. It had stopped just before I got here. So now we'll put it back on track, and that was part of our debt stabilization plan, which is to see how we can forecast what's going to happen in the future over the next 10 to 20 years, what we can afford, and how we can get it done. Good. So it sounds like a daunting number. There's about $260 million in sewer expenses that have to be done in order to expand the rest of the town, which is 30% of the town is not sewered. But town meeting has authorized quite a bit of projects over the past few years to the tune of, in the last 5 years, we've authorized and spent, or in the process of spending about $40 million on sewer improvements.
So that's something that these people will see soon. I mean, that's, I guess what my question was getting to was, give us some of the things that people will notice. And you've talked about police and fire, but oftentimes that's not something that's noticeable. Something like a sewer project is going to be something noticeable.
It is. I mean, one of the things that this is someone in government, $260 million in the ground is tough because you don't see it as much as you see other things. And people don't think about it when they flush their toilet, but it is the 34B contract, which is now, they're called needs areas now under the new plan. So that's needs area 1, and that's getting, that just started. In fact, they're doing clearing for that right now. And they'll actually get a shovel in the ground right in the spring. So that contract is awarded. It's a $9 million job. That's over in East Billerica.
What area? Okay, East Billerica.
Yeah, in the governor's area. So That's getting started. And then we have needs area 2, which is what was the old contract 35. So they split it into 2 phases, phase 1 and 2, and that's about $9 million a pop for each one of those. So we've got those timed out a few years down the road. First we pay for the design, and then we pay for the work itself. Okay. So, so the biggest thing you'll see is that you'll see that project start up, the sewer project starting up this year. There's some road work that we're looking to do. If you recall in town meeting the last year, we added an additional $500,000, which supplements our Chapter 90 appropriation. So we get roughly $1 million from Chapter 90 every year to do roadway work, which is great. And it comes from the state, for those who don't know. So it's not coming from the local tax rate, but it's really coming from the estate taxes. In that, $1 million sounds like a lot of money, but it doesn't go a long way in a town that has 26 square miles.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it's over 200-something miles of roadway. So we're adding $500,000 to supplement that. And this year, a lot of that is going towards some sidewalk work in North Billerica, over by the commuter rail and the school. So we're trying to expedite some projects that are on our long. We have a roadway management plan, and that's on there, but we wouldn't get to that if we didn't invest more money into it. We wouldn't get to it till a few years down the road. So that project's on the docket for this year. We're doing takings for the Allen Road project that's coming up, because that's on the tip. That's a state-funded program that is supposed to be funded in 2015. So we need to do some work ahead of that. So there's design, some work in the street that has to take place. So before we can start the actual project, there'll be some work taking place in the street on that. Middlesex Turnpike, so a lot of the things we're working on are, there's a lot of it's design. So Turnpike is we got that on the tip as well, and that was a monumental task because it had to be on the MAPC tip, which isn't really in our district. It's the Boston district. So they didn't want to really fund it because it wasn't really 100% in their district. And it had been knocked off previously, so we've managed to get that back on the tip. That's a $22 million project. $1 million of it's being funded by our regional planning agency, NIMCOG, and $21 million of it is being funded through the MAPC. And that's also slated for 2015. And so we're going through the permit process, takings, and the state DEP process as well. So that's another. Those are some
a lot of traffic, a lot of traffic issues and road work.
See, one of the big issues, and I know it's come up with the waste management going down on Salem Road. People say, why do we have to take these businesses? Why can't we tell them no? And the thing is that you can't say no to a business that you don't like if it's allowed by right in the zoning. But what you can do, and what we're trying to do, is make it more attractive for higher end uses to come in. And that's what all these infrastructures projects are about. And the town center project as well was about that, was to try to, if you don't want pizza shops, Chinese food restaurants, or if you think we had enough of them, then the idea is to try to attract a higher end use.
What are they looking for? I understand that.
Yeah, and so that's the answer to some of those questions.
Well, you just talked about the waste management programs. Just for quickly, let's just say, I know recently you negotiated a contract for our recyclables. Yeah. So that'll be something people will see this coming summer?
Yeah, it'll start in the fiscal year, so July 1 it starts, and it's a pretty good deal for the town. We're paying less money for more service.
That's great.
And we're saving about $300,000 a year. And we're adding single stream recycling. Right now we have dual stream recycling. And previously in the town, they had moved to dual stream, and they had roughly about 3% of the town's waste was recycled. It was taken out of the waste stream and recycled. Then when they put the new recycling in place with Allied, they got it up to 11. But 11 is a lot better than 3.
Absolutely.
But it can actually be,
Could be
what
better.
The standard is it should be 30 to 40%. So from going to a dual stream, which discourages a lot of people from recycling,
Right.
and going to a single stream with the same 65-gallon
Sure.
drum that you use now for waste, you get a second one, which will be green, and that will be used for recycling.
Great.
So everything goes into that bin, and it's automated pickup, just like.
It's not going to be the same days of the week now?
It's going to be, yeah, it's going to be over 5 days instead of just one day,
Okay.
which was, for us, was Monday.
Right.
And from the town perspective, I think I'm happy with the change, because what happened, what we've experienced is that if you have a snowstorm on a Monday,
Yeah, nothing gets picked up. Yeah.
nothing gets picked up. And Allied, and this isn't a knock on Allied or any business,
Sure.
but they don't want to change the schedule, because when they pick up a town in one day,
Yeah.
that means they got their equipment tied up in other towns
Every
the
other
other
day.
4 days
Sure.
of the week. But with this situation, if they're already in town 5 days a week and you have a snowstorm, it just gets tacked on to the next pickup schedule. And it's a little easier to handle
Sure.
those things. So from a management perspective, going in 5 days a week, I think is going to be
Can I
better
just-
for the town.
Let's have one piece of input before I get to
Yeah.
Peter on the trash thing. Sometimes when you have, whether it's leaf collection or special collection, just say, you put a thing on the board saying it's on your former trash day, right? That's what it says.
Yeah.
Well, how many people remember what their former trash day is, number one?
Yeah.
Or if you've only moved to this community in the last 3 years, you didn't have a former trash day.
Right.
So if you could put on the website, or have somebody put on the website, by street name, what's your street, these are your pickup days. I mean, that would be,
Yeah.
it seems like a simple spreadsheet, to say that your pickup day is Tuesday, or your pickup day is Wednesday. That would
You know,
seem to me.
where I am, we have they mail it out. So I just tack it on the
That's
inside
fine.
of the door with a trash can usually.
No, that's
anyway.
fine.
But
That's
maybe
great to do it that way.
something you can do, you know?
But when you put the thing in the comment that says leaf pickup will be, or your tree, your
Yeah.
Christmas trees, it'll be on your former trash day.
Right.
Well, what the hell was my former trash day? I don't know.
Yeah. No. So.
But anyway,
I just want to go back to what Tony started. In layman's terms, John, can you explain the debt stabilization account, why you've got it, how it benefits the taxpayer? Because a lot of people hear it and think it's cute, but don't really know what it means.
Yeah.
Can you just,
Yeah.
in layman's terms, tell us what that means?
Yeah. So a town has to, I've heard through this whole political season, I heard the one comment that we shouldn't borrow money, and that we shouldn't, borrow money for anything. And that's not true, because if you think about, should this generation of taxpayers bear the burden for building, say, the Parker School? Should everybody pay for it over 2 years instead of over 30? I don't think that's fair to the taxpayers of this generation, that they're going to have to pay for the use of a school that's going to last for 50 years in 2 years. It should be spread out. The burden should be spread across all of the taxpayers over a long period of time, because everybody's going to benefit from it. For that reason alone, from an equity standpoint, the town has to carry debt. Now, the next question is, well, how much debt should a town carry? We have a very low debt-to-budget ratio, and the financial world looks at it and says, your debt service, what you pay, like your mortgage payment of your home, should represent no more than 10% of your budget. So our budget is $130 million. So we shouldn't be paying more than $13 million a year in debt service. So right now, our policy is to pay $9 million. So it's not 10%, it's a little lower than 10%. But we don't want to be at 3%. So if we're only paying $1 million or $2 million in debt service a year, we're not investing anything in the infrastructure of the town, which is a bad thing, because down the road, you're going to pay for it tenfold when things start to collapse, as we've experienced in town with the water treatment plant and different things. So we're carrying $9 million, which represents about 7% of our debt, of our budget. And so our goal is to maintain that $9 million. And the philosophy is, if we're always paying $9 million for debt, then it's not impacting the operating budget, and people aren't paying more for that debt service. People talk about the national debt, and generations are going to have to pay for that down the road. That's because it keeps it ballooning and exploding. What we're saying is, we're not doing that. We're going to maintain a certain level of debt. It's not going to grow, a debt service, I should say. And that way it doesn't have an adverse impact on the taxpayer. So that's $9 million that we're maintaining. But the problem with that, or the restriction with that, is that in certain periods while you're trying to invest in your infrastructure, you're going to have spikes in your debt service. So you might need to pay $10 or $12 million in that particular year for debt service. And if you can't account for that, or if you can't accommodate for that, then it's going to really slow down the rate which you can invest in your infrastructure. So what we've done is we started this debt stabilization fund, so that when we get to those points and along the debt schedule where it creeps up over $9 million, we take it out of the debt stabilization fund. It doesn't impact the tax levy, and it's only the $9 million that impacts the tax levy, and it stays at that $9 million.
That makes sense.
So that's the philosophy, and that was the town meeting has been very cooperative with that. They've listened, and they've put money aside into that fund. We currently have, I think, $4.5 or $5 million in that fund right now. Looking at our debt schedule over time, we should try to build it up to $10 million, because we don't need that today. We won't actually need the debt stabilization fund till, I think, 2016, and so at that point we start dipping into it. But we'll also keep putting money into it, and where the money comes from is when we get free cash certification every year, we try to put a certain amount of that aside to debt stabilization. And the other source is, in those years when we know our debt service is not going to reach $9 million.
Like you might have had that in the last few years, but
we have it this
favorable
year.
interest rates.
In fact, this year, because we're not going out long-term till the next fiscal year, our actual debt service is projected to be about, I think it's $7.8 million. So we would appropriate $1.2 million into the debt stabilization fund, so that we're maintaining that commitment to $9 million. So never goes above $9 million, but it never goes below $9 million. Because one of the mistakes communities make is that when they're not carrying a lot of debt, or when they don't have a lot of debt service, they take that money and they put it into other things. But what they're doing is they're shirking their responsibility to commit to infrastructure improvement. And then when it's harder to get that back if you've already given it away. So what we're doing is saying we're not giving that away. We're always going to maintain $9 million, and we're not going to put that into, say, some other project, or settling contracts, or this or that. So that's why it requires some discipline. When we go get our bond rating reviewed, they love it. They think it's great, and it allows us to plan for infrastructure improvements over the future.
What was our debt service before you came? What were they budgeting for debt service before you came?
Well, it was at one point it was at 6%, and then when I implemented this policy, I did it right at that 9.066 number, which is $9 million. So now we're up a little over 7%. So, but if we had done nothing, it would have just continued to go down.
Sure, I understand that.
And then, at some point we'd be at 4 and 3%.
Right.
And then some people will say, well, why don't you just give that money back to the taxpayers, lower their taxes? Well, in a sense, this is protecting your tax rate, because what's happening is that money is going to be used to make sure that you don't have to pay tenfold for infrastructure improvements when your back's against the wall and the DEP's coming in and issuing an administrative consent order and saying, you got to do this, because if you don't, like for example, our facility, our wastewater treatment facility, we're investing about $30 million in that over the next few years. Now, if we did nothing with that and it just started falling apart, the DEP would come in and say, you know what, we are actually having they're called sewer surcharge overflows in the Concord River. And if you don't do anything about that, they say, well, we're going to hit you with another ACO, and you got to do it now, and this is 10 years down the road or 5 years down the road. The cost of construction is probably 50% higher than it is today, and it costs more because you're doing it on the fly and you're not planning for it. And so then the taxpayers get hit even harder. So this way, you're using that, instead of giving that free cash back, giving that money back to the taxpayer, you're taking it and preserving the tax rate in the future by using it to keep everything predictable, level, and steady.
One other, going back once again to Tony's question, part of your answer was you were going to add manpower to public safety.
Yes.
Has DPW ever made it back to its mid-1990 levels?
No,
Does
they
it have
haven't.
to? Are we understaffed there?
There is this issues at the DPW, and we do, I think we're going to have to increase the manpower there. You know, obviously, public safety, we want to do that first, but there are other things going on in DPW as well, like with the wastewater treatment plant, we have second and third shifts. We're going to probably be eliminating those shifts over the next 2 or 3 years because of the improvements we're making. So some of that personnel will either retire, and we can use that personnel to increase the highway division, or they could move over to the highway division if they're not old enough to do that. Sure. So we are trying to plan for improvements to I think particularly the highway division and Parks and Cemetery, those two divisions right now are really taxed.
And they've been taxed for quite a while.
Yeah, and we have a lot of, you know, unfortunately we have a lot of disability issues right now in terms of people out on disability, and so it's even more taxed. So that is an issue, and we are looking at it over the next couple of years. And there's a lot of reorganization going on in DPW, and so I think we can take advantage of that and try to bring them back to a place where they should be.
Okay, now let's get into, I mean, it's March, you're preparing for town meeting. The biggest thing you're preparing for, obviously, is the budget. Let's talk about any major changes to the budget, any unforeseen budget busters, as we used to call them, back when we didn't have money, that might be in there, or anything that town meeting or the residents should know about that's different from our normal, usual budget.
We have this, as I said at the outset, I mean, we're in good financial shape, and a lot of the typical budget busters aren't there this year. Health insurance is level funded. It was pretty much level funded last year. We've made some changes to the plan. We took advantage of the state statute where we changed co-pays and things like that, and that allowed us to save some money. And we're lucky right now. We're self-insured, and our claims history is good. So our health care costs are very stable. So that's one that typically can go up 12 to 15%.
And it's interesting to hear you say that, because when you were here last time, you weren't a huge fan of the reform bill, if I remember correctly. But
GIC?
you were able to take advantage.
Are you talking GIC?
No, but the whole bill.
Okay.
But you were able to take advantage of it. You didn't have to use the GIC, but you used it to renegotiate, right? I mean,
what I wasn't crazy about was going to the GIC.
Okay. But you were able to use the law, right? Or the reform.
That's what we did. We said, we'll wait till it comes out, and then we'll use it to try to improve our plan to be GIC-like, as they say. Okay. Which is really what that whole
I want to come back
is.
to that, not to the GIC thing, but to
Yeah.
the savings that you've generated from that.
Yeah.
But let's finish answering Peter's question.
So then there are a few other things that are typical budget busters too. Retirement contributions. This year, you know, the retirement schedule, there is I think it's $67,000 that it's increasing. So we're not going to have, that's not a budget buster. However, what we did do is we implemented a new policy that we want to make a 4% commitment to our retirement every year, or to OPEB, which is a new thing, which OPEB is other post-employment benefits, which is the cost associated with people that retire, particularly the health care. So the big story right now is that, you know, over time, we pay as you go right now. We pay for our retirees every year, and it's working out, you know, okay at this point. But as healthcare costs increase over time, that's a huge liability to the town. So all the accountants want towns to plan for these healthcare retirement benefits in the future. Very similar.
Because they're living longer too.
Right. It's very similar to the pension plan. Ultimately, what you'd hope would happen is that not only do you have a pension plan that's fully funded, you have other post-employment benefits plan that's fully funded as well, so that the town isn't budgeting for these healthcare costs, which is significant. It's $5 to $6 million a year for retirees out of a total budget of $14 million.
Right.
So that's a big chunk. So what we're doing is we started that fund, and we started a new policy that we're going to invest at least 4% in retirement every year. And if we don't invest 4%, then we're going to invest the difference in the OPEB fund. So this year there's an appropriation for like $255,000, which represents the difference between that $67,000 plus the $255,000. But there will be years when we have to contribute 4% to pension and we won't put anything in OPEB. But that's a difference in this year's budget. It's not a huge number, but it's a difference. It's a new thing that we're implementing, and like the capital plan we did for the previous year, this is a new policy. So that's impacting the budget, not big in a big way, but it's a policy decision. The biggest contribution to the budget this year financially in terms of financial impact is the Shawsheen assessment. It's going up $600,000. And that is a result of the enrollment shifts. There's a lower enrollment in the Billerica public school system combined with a higher enrollment in Shawsheen.
How many students did they increase roughly?
I think it was 46. Yeah, it's in the last year. So that's the one biggest contribution to the increases. We've made a lot of changes on the town side in terms of, like I mentioned, those positions. And when you go through all of them, the change is about actually a savings of about $26,000. But then when you take contractual obligations, the total change to the town budget is about $270,000, which is less than 1%. So the town side of the budget is not going up much at all. The school side of the budget is going up. It's 1.4 for the school system, 600,000 for the Shawsheen. So that's the biggest increase to the budget this year on the school side, and I know you'll probably talk to Tim about that. But I think a lot of their costs are generated by a lot of the things happening in special ed.
Unfunded mandates, unfortunately.
Yeah, school choice is a huge hit, especially for Billerica because of our geographic location. There are people going to charter schools and Shawsheen and other things. So that has an impact on unfunded, and on their level, they don't budget because they don't know. They don't know who's going to choice out, and so somebody goes to Minuteman, that costs us money. So that's the biggest piece of the budget in terms of price. I have a list here that I put together just for such occasions. Let me see if I can grab it to see if I can tell you about some of the other changes that happened to the budget. Bear with me.
You know, some of these out-of-district costs, while he's looking, some of these out-of-district costs, Tony, for special ed, can be as high as $200,000 per student.
Sure.
When a child goes to 24/7 care up at Clotchard Mountain, their facility up there, I can remember back when I was on the finance committee having one child up there, $245,000 a year it cost Billerica. You could send 6 kids to Harvard for that. You know, think about that. It's astronomical, and it is, I won't say it's totally borne by the town of Billerica, but according to their format, a huge chunk of it is, and we have no choice. We can't go out and find an alternative.
Yeah, school choice is tough. Because,
it is tough.
Yeah. In a way, I mean, the risk of making a political statement about school choice is it sort of hamstrings the communities because they go to a different school, then they have less funding, essentially. And,
well, my gripe about special ed is, and it's not about special ed per se, it's about the cost factor. Why is a child who has physical and medical disabilities, I can understand his education needs, but why is his physical needs borne by the Department of Ed?
Right.
You know, why isn't that third-party insurance?
Right.
You know, I just never did understand that.
Yeah, it just keeps growing exponentially.
It does,
every year.
yeah.
But some of the items that are in this year's budget that I try to point out, because as Tony, you said, there are things that we did to actually, there are obviously things that are contractual.
Sure.
And they just go up every year. But there are things that we did that were conscious budget decisions that have changed it. And one is we had mentioned the $301,000 savings for the waste management contract. So that was an actual savings. And that was the result of renegotiating that contract. And then we have some savings in sewer and water as well. We've got about $240,000 in the water, utilities, and supplies accounts. And a lot of that has to do with the way we use chemicals And also, we, if you recall, we invested about $850,000 in energy improvements to the plant, the sewer plant, and that has resulted in savings on the utility side. So we were able to reduce the budget, both of those budgets, by substantial numbers. 240, sewer was 185, and water was 240,000. So as much as we're spending all this money on capital and the sewer, at least it's nice to know that it does create efficiencies in the operating end, and that we're seeing some of the results of that now. And there is, you know, I also put in here retirement buybacks as people retire. I point them out just so that you know that when we go through the budget process, well, why did this personnel line go up $68,000? Well, because you had 2 people retire and they're doing their buybacks. And, so there is some money in there for that. The two positions in police are $124,000. The 2 positions in fire are $117,000. Our elections division is going down $56,000 because we had an enormous amount of elections last year. And so that just ebbs and flows every year. You'll be happy to hear this. The legal account is going down. I will,
or he will.
Both of you, actually. The legal account is going down. I reduced that by 40 grand because I do a lot of the labor stuff myself at the table. I don't have a lawyer at the table every time, and it's been the practice in the past that they did that. So we'll save some money.
You wait to bring them in at the end when you need to.
I'll bring them in if I need them, or maybe at the end. But
we're going to have an evening to fund Kevin Feely.
That's right.
I guess that means that Patrick's not going to be buying any beer.
No, Kevin Feely is he still?
He still does the Labor Council, yeah. Okay. So that's
good Arlington boy.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. He is. So we get that, and then there's let's see if there's any highlights in here. There are other things in here that a veterans benefit goes up every year.
As well it should.
70 grand this year we're putting in based on what they're spending. And that is logical. I mean, unfortunately they have, you know, there's a lot of needs now, people coming back. And, you know, it used to be, I mean, I've been around long enough, it used to be that, you know, it was World War II veterans, and that was, but now you get all these young guys coming in.
Absolutely.
And they have families, and they have all sorts of...
And they've been a long time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've been doing this for 11 years
long
now,
time.
12 years now.
Yeah. And it's, you know, so it's a good service to have. It is 75% reimbursed by the state, so that's, you know, makes it a little
Well, with some of the savings that you highlighted, and I just want to touch on something that you mentioned just a short time ago. We talked about the town's pension liability, about funding the town's pension liability. You know, right now we're, just a little north of 100 million, right, unfunded pension liability?
That's much more north of that. It's 260 million is the unfunded liability.
Okay. So. Is there, how much of an effort is there to try to take some of these savings in other areas and say, you know what, we have an opportunity to put something towards that number every year?
Well, that's what that 4%, so the retirement, so we have a plan in place that we started the fund last year. We have a plan in place that we would invest money in it if we have extra money left.
How much can we chip away at that 200 million?
Not much, because, and it's not going to come from there. It's not going to come from us putting money away, because it's such a grand number.
Where's it going to come from?
It's going to come from reform. It's going to come from...
the state taking it over?
Bailout?
No, actually not a bailout. It's going to come from, like, there's a bill in the legislature right now where you have, in the municipalities, if you work for 10 years, you're vested, and then you're eligible for health care benefits. Well, they're talking about changing that to 20 years, so that people aren't working for 10 years coming out, and then the town has that burden. But so now you'll have to work for 20 years, and at 20 years, you won't be fully vested. You'll only be 50% vested. And then incrementally, you work your way up to 30 years, and if you hit 30 years, you're fully vested. And if the town's, like in Billerica, it's 90-10. So that means if you're fully vested, the town's going to pick up 90% of the cost.
A bill like that, is that, how much savings can that take, or how much money can that take off of that 200 million?
I don't know the exact number, but it's much more significant than what we're doing right now.
I'm sure it is, yeah.
And,
it would have to be, right?
Right, and so there are other things that we're looking at, ways to address this thing, like doing audits of our the people that are on it, making sure that everybody that's on it is eligible for it.
Yeah.
And then the 90-10 thing, we're one of the few communities left in the Commonwealth that does 90-10 as opposed to 75-25.
Wait till my mother doesn't need it anymore.
Well, everything the way they do these things is a grandfathered thing,
sure.
so it's always sort of the agreement with his new hires, not with people that they already made a. Yeah.
Rest easy, Karen.
Yeah. So, but that's where it's going to come from. I mean, and people talk about it. I mean, the accounting world looks at it differently than people like us. And I mean, yeah, it's a $260 million expense if you had to pay it all today. But we don't have to pay it all today. We're going to pay it out over 20 or 30 years. And right now, we're paying as we go. And in that $260 million number is also what we pay as we go. So it's a little deceiving. So that,
well, it's still over 20 years. It's still $10 million plus a year. Though. That's a pretty good number.
So the short takeaway is that in 15 years, that number is going to go from 5 million to some much higher number. So I think the real way to get at it is through some of these reforms.
Good.
Let's, can we switch speeds here, and let's go, the town center, of course, has been a major issue in this town since last October's town meeting. Give us Plan B, if there is one. And I assume there is one, because, that's just so unsafe over there. I hope there's a Plan B.
Yeah, it's, I have asked the engineers to look at it, and then a lot of people think that, all right, we got rid of that town center project. Now you need to go out and fix the town center, and I think it can be done for $2 million, and
I've heard that
it's easy. And just build new sidewalks out there. That's all we want. We just want wider sidewalks. Well, in order to do that, you have to shift the roadway to do that. And since the sidewalks are wider, if you shift the roadway, then you're moving everything in there. So it's a domino effect. So these things that people want to cherry pick off the list, you just can't. It's not easy to do that. So what we've really come down to is the only things that we can address, and the most important thing is pedestrian safety, and that's the crosswalks and things like that.
Signals.
Signalization.
But even the signalization, that's another misconception out there. They think that we can fix the signals. We can't. They already did that. They did that in 2005 or so. They redid all the signals out there with the money from the first go-around. And we're limited by the configuration that's out there, which was why it was redesigned in the first place, is because it offers so many limitations that we can't change the signalization to make it work better under the current configuration. So it isn't as simple as going out and changing the timing on the lights. That's already been done. So that ship sailed. We already tried that. And we're not going to be able to fix those lights any better than they are now. But the thing that we can do is try to improve the ability for people to get across the street.
Wait a second. In front of the library to the town common, and from the town common to, say, Manja Manja, you can't put in pedestrian signals.
Well, we can do that, but people, you were talking about the sequencing of the lights and the way the traffic flows. Okay. We can't do that. But we are looking at trying to get people across the street.
Right, okay, that's where we got it.
But the problem with that is that from a traffic safety standpoint, the way the current layout is, there's only one scenario where the way you want it is that you want to have people always crossing at a dedicated traffic signal.
Correct.
And there isn't really a way to do that out there, because you can't, if you put a traffic light, say, where people cross in the middle of the common, you can't put a traffic signal there.
Right.
Because there's already 2 traffic signals.
Right, okay.
So what will happen is those will be eliminated. We have to take those crosswalks out because they're unsafe.
And move a crosswalk maybe closer to where the Bennett is.
Right, so over there, that's one area where we could actually signalize and have people get across at a dedicated signal.
That makes
but
sense.
To do it, you got to go here, here, here,
I understand
here,
that.
here.
I understand.
And again, that's why we redesigned the whole thing. But we will we'll work on doing those things. But the perception that there's some magic fix under the current scenario that's going to work, we'll never be able to achieve the traffic safety or the pedestrian safety that we want under the current configuration without making significant changes. But we can't do that because there's no funding in place to do that. So we'll do what we can to make it better, but it will never meet what's acceptable from a pedestrian crossing, public safety standpoint.
Okay.
So.
And that takes the burying of the utility wires totally out of the picture.
Oh, yeah. That
doesn't happen.
That wouldn't happen. Yeah, no, we wouldn't even look at that in terms of, we would only be looking at pedestrian safety and trying to get across the street. Because right now, they cross in front of the senior center, and we can't put a traffic signal in there. So that's not, we can improve it, and we can mark it better, and we can do a few things, but we can't do it to the level that it is really, would be accepted by, traffic guidelines. So.
Okay. Well, that's good. At least there's something else.
Well, something has to be done.
Okay.
Somebody's going to get killed out there.
Just changing topics as much as you can tell us about the discussions at the prison.
Your former employer.
Yes, that's right.
Interestingly enough.
So as much as you can tell us as to how those discussions have gone.
The funny thing is I don't really deal with the sheriff's office on this.
Sure.
I deal with DCAM and A&F. A&F is Administration and Finance. So, the Board of Selectmen has given me my marching orders, which is they're not interested in an expansion of the prison up there. So the process that we're in now is explaining to them all the problems that this will present. And the biggest one, obviously, is the impact to our sewer system.
Absolutely.
Wastewater. So up until, a few months ago, we were going back and forth about what the rate of flow out of their facility is now versus what it might be if they expanded by what looks to be 400 plus beds. And my concern too was that, in the last go around, they put in a certain number of beds, and then the day after they opened, they double bunked and doubled the number. So, but looking at everything, it looks like the town covered their end in terms of getting the cost of all those additional beds. But what if that happens again? And
Sure.
so I've been having that discussion with them as well, and they told me that wouldn't happen. But we would want to make sure that that we were assured that we were going to be protected from any impact that might have.
Are they open? I mean, you have more discussion with your selectmen, obviously, than I do.
Yeah.
But are they open to the idea of an expansion if the circumstances can be mitigated that would impact this community?
I think
such
they
a
would have
sewer?
to see that before they did that, and at this point,
But do they have a choice?
well, that's a good question. The thing is that what they're required to do is they have to get an industrial sewer permit from the town, and they don't have to go to the building department except for electrical.
Right.
And you can only, if they meet the code, you can't really tell them they can't do it. So the hook that we have is the industrial sewer permit. And even that is going to be, we have to make the case that they can't satisfy our needs or the impact of the community. So that's sort of where the discussion is
So the
now.
discussion's really not focusing too much on public safety, which I live in that section of town, and I
Yeah.
don't have a problem with it, so I'm just...
Well, I mean, I've again, maybe...
Well, it's easy for your family to come visit you.
They'd be visiting you before they visit me.
But they've explained, they've presented to us how they would address the public safety, obviously the security and the
Sure.
perimeter. Actually, under the layout that they have now, it would probably result in everything being, at some point in the future, brought inside the perimeter, which for our standpoint would be preferable.
Right.
Even the CWP, Community Work Program that's on the street, at some point would be brought inside the perimeter. And that all came about because they're calling it temporary, because their plan is that they want to go to southern Middlesex.
Temporary is our lifetime.
Well, it's not temporary, and they admit that too.
Sure.
I mean, the building is permanent.
Correct.
So even if they move the jail inmates out of there, they'll probably move CWP in
Something
there.
else will be in there.
So it'll
those
be
beds. Sure.
occupied. So, I mean, we've said that that's the way we're approaching it, is that nothing up there that you would plan, no matter what you say. And they haven't been deceptive about that. They've said that the structures are permanent.
Right.
But moving stuff off the street and into the building sometime in the future would probably be preferable. But I think the biggest concern that we have is that, we've got people in town that have waited for sewer for a long time, and is this going to impact the time that they have to wait, and is it going to impact the volume on our system? So.
Will this increase in the beds at the House of Correction increase the dangerousness of the prisoners that will come to Billerica?
Yeah, that's the other issue, which is the stigma associated with having a House of Correction in your community, which is, in this case, people perceive, and perception is reality, that we have a House of Correction, and, that's different than the DOC, which is they're violent offenders. I mean, there are violent offenders in the House of Correction now.
But only supposedly waiting for trial.
Well, there are people there that are waiting for trial. There were always a certain level of jail inmates in there, but they're only less than 100, I think, at a time.
Okay.
And then you got the guys that are in there for a small-time offense that previously were put away for murder or something else. So there are people in there that are violent offenders, but the perception is, for all intents and purposes, that that's a small-time facility. But now what they're proposing, basically, is by bringing the jail in there, granted they're not guilty until they're, they go through trial, but they're classified as violent offenders and housed in a high security environment. And at 400 plus, so to me that changes the dynamic of that facility. It now becomes a House of Correction with small-time offenders and a jail with 400 plus violent offenders, which changes the perception of what that facility is and the perception of public safety concerns around that facility. And there'll be high-profile inmates in there that, we all hear about and read about in the newspaper. So that has an impact on the community, and there's a stigma associated with it. And even though there's already a facility here, and let's face it, that's why they're coming here, it's easy to come here, there is going to be a change in the perception of what that is, and that could have an impact on our community, and to me that has value. So, so either they don't locate it there, or they have to prove to us that they can offset that perception.
How long is this process going to take, do you think?
Probably another couple of months, I would say, because they have an aggressive schedule that they want to do. So, if the board decides, that they want to pursue anything to stop it, then they'd have to do it in fairly short order.
Okay.
But if they sit down and look at things and decide that there's something there to mitigate our concerns, then that has to happen quick too.
Okay.
So, but there has been some differences, and this process has been pretty bad up until the last 4 months. We felt like, you recall the whole incident where they went to Cambridge and told Cambridge that they were going to sell their building, but neglected to come to Billerica and tell us they're going to move all their inmates down there. And then there was a process after that point where they were supposed to sit down with us, and that never really took place, because they pulled back and had to look at sentencing issues and everything else to decide how they wanted to pursue it. But that lack of communication didn't go over well with the board.
Sure.
And so now I have been meeting with them, or even conference calling with them on almost a weekly basis to make sure that...
So there's some progress in the issue, whether it's progress towards a resolve, but there's progress on the issue.
Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of things on the table that I can bring to the selectmen. I don't want to get into them right now, but there's definitely been a lot more communication now, and like you said, progress. So.
When did the warrant close? Was it this Friday?
It's closing on Monday.
It's closing on Monday. Any surprises in there that you've seen, or have you not seen anything?
We have 2 petitioners articles. Those are always surprises.
Can we comment on them, or are we?
Well, I guess they're public records. So one of them is to shorten the presentations for a town meeting. So in other words, you can only do a 15-minute presentation. So for the budget, there would only be a 15-minute presentation.
That's ludicrous.
Well, I didn't say that.
No, I did.
Yes, but
in my humble opinion.
And then the other one is, I think that's a response to the length of time that the town center proposal took to present to the to town meeting. But then the second one is it has to do with the electronic voting, which is they want the votes, the results of the votes immediately, so that you could look up and see how everybody voted. Right now, we put them up the day after. Mm-hmm. And that was a decision by the EVIC, the voting committee, and it was actually brought up at town meeting. It was, in order to look at everyone's vote, because there's so many members of town meeting, you'd have to have a rolling, right. People wouldn't be able to see who voted where, and you couldn't really get a sense of what you were looking at, because you'd have to look at the screen for about 20 minutes, and if we did that between every vote at town meeting, it would kind of defeat the purpose of having electronic voting in the first place. So that's why it was decided to just look at it afterwards. Certainly, I think town meeting wanted to do that. I don't think it requires an article to do that. But
having served on that first article you talked about, having served on Finance Committee for so long, you simply can't do justice to a $130 million budget in 15 minutes. I mean, it just can't be done.
Yeah.
I don't think.
No, and even any other issues, like if we're talking about a $16 million bond for wastewater, I think you might want to talk about it for more than 15 minutes.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
I would hope so.
So.
Speaking of Finance Committee, if you notice the name tag in front of me, that is my own old Finance Committee name tag that a good friend, Dave Gagliardi, pulled out of the town hall trash for me. So fame is fleeting, folks.
Yeah, and that was declared that it had no useful purpose for the town anymore, and
some
was
people said
declared surplus.
Yeah, some people said it had no useful purpose, even when it was in fact usable. I did have before I talk about, quickly about, I want to ask you something about the new school plan, but I did have a question texted in from our colleague, Jim O'Donnell, a financial question that he wanted me to ask you, and if you could answer it, it'd be appreciated. He wants to know if a dealer has a 10 showing, should he hit on 15?
I think he should.
He should. Okay, I'll
15,
get that right back to him if it's not too late. He might be coming home COD. Just quickly, the school has a very aggressive plans out there for renovation of their system and the high school. Quickly, as the chief financial officer of the town, which the town manager is, I mean, debt exclusion? I mean, how do you finance that? It could be as high as $100+ million.
Yeah, I think you have to do it through a debt exclusion. For high school, it's such a big number. But it's such a big investment for the town. It's a good investment. It affects the whole community. People come into town based on that. The number one reason for people to buy real estate is whether the school system in that community is good or not. So I think that it's a good investment. It should be debt excluded only because you'll never be able to do that under the Proposition 2.5 without seriously impacting the operating budget. It's counterintuitive, in fact, because you end up laying off teachers and everything else just to fund the building of the high school. It's very similar on a micro level. What happened with the not the Parker School, the Ditson. The Ditson was done under the operating budget, but the capital program for the school department suffered tremendously because everything was getting sucked up by that.
In hindsight, that was a mistake.
And so, and I know they cut things out of that building, like air conditioning for certain things like the gym or things like that, that probably should have been put in, but probably weren't because they were under such constraints. And So I think from a long term and just from a budgeting standpoint, you have to do that outside the budget, and you have to do it through debt exclusion because it's such a big number. But you can't go wrong in terms of an investment in your community. That's the best investment you can make is in education. And second of all is that we're almost $2 million under Proposition 2.5 right now, and a lot of this is preparing for things like this. So if we're maintaining a levy that's $2 million under Proposition 2.5, then even though you're doing a debt exclusion on top of that, you're still somewhere in the middle of. You might be a little bit over 2.5, but not as much as you would be if you were taxing to the maximum tax levy. So that's why we're trying to be aggressive about preserving the Proposition 2.5 levy cap, so that the impact of a debt exclusion will be less than it would be if we had 100% of the levy, and then on top of that, it's a huge debt exclusion. So,
it is my honor to welcome back Ace.
Hi, Peter.
Go for it. Hi, Ace. How are you?
Good. I got a new hat.
I saw that. I kind of like the
Riverhawks going to the garden. By the time this airs, it'll be over. But
you better get those pair of those glasses too.
Yeah.
I was just telling the guys in there when I first got these glasses, I couldn't see out of them. Now, scary enough.
Scary enough.
They're perfect.
What do we got, Ace?
They're actually perfect.
Know about?
Oh, have I got material for you? Under that golden dome. Education Commissioner doubles down on transgender bathroom policy. You aware of this?
I haven't heard.
I'm surprised. I know that you pay a lot of attention to this. Commissioner Mitchell Chester, has issued an 11-page directive just before the kids went on February break, by the way, just so it would be nice and quiet. The document states that school bathrooms, locker rooms, and athletic teams are now open to students of either sex, depending on what the student decides to be.
Where was that when I was in high school?
Okay. You can imagine how this is playing with the Mass Family Institute, okay?
Maybe he would have ended up over at the House Correction.
It's ludicrous. I mean, one day you say, I feel like a guy, and the next day I
Whatever floats your boat. Go ahead.
I mean, I'm a lesbian, trapped in a man's body. I love women. So
That's Tony Location.
So I should be allowed to go into the ladies' bathroom.
Absolutely.
That's a little too weird.
And probably have on some occasions, but that's
a little too weird for me.
Okay.
So what else is there going on up on Beacon Hill? Well, I can tell you not a lot.
Yeah, what do you mean?
There was no roll calls in the last week's session, and they met for a total of 6 minutes in the House and 9 minutes in the Senate.
At how much a year for a rep? Is
Way
it
too much.
63,000?
Way too much, okay? So what's going on up there? Some bills that are filed for this coming year of particular interest, a scratch ticket bill to have a second chance lottery to get rid of all those scratch tickets laying on the ground. This is a good one, Peter, and I think I'm going to take care of this one. A new Adopt a Senior program, okay?
Works for me.
A statewide Adopt a Senior volunteer program. Do I get to claim you on my taxes? Because I need the write-off, too.
I would think so.
Okay, to help you with snow removal and property maintenance services. And it creates
There you go.
creation of a registry of volunteers. But
Where
can't
were
we
you
do this
last
through a
week,
COA? Can't we do this through like the COA?
I
Do we have to need a state program for this? I don't know. Ban lobbying for 3 years on former legislators, salary cap, boring stuff. Underage drinking. Allow police officers to PC underage kids when they're drinking, with or without their consent. Flags at half-staff, for public
Underage
safety.
drinking? That's been going on for centuries.
Yeah, I know, and then they're going to PC you for it. Just call your mother, right? That's what they should do. Just say, we're going to call your mother. Bring your mother down, give us, and then we'll go from there. So not a lot happening up there.
They're doing the people's business.
So, John, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for taking time out from your Saturday, and good luck at swimming lessons.
That's good. We'll have fun.
And thank you very much for answering Jimmy's question.
Oh, it's no problem. Let me know how he makes out
Yeah.
with that. I want a piece of the action if he does well.
If
If
he loses,
it's bad advice, forget I ever said it.
Thanks very much. Anything in closing quickly?
No, see you next week.